Imagine, for a moment, that the sky isn't just a vast, empty expanse of blue or a canvas for pretty sunsets, but a digital web of judgment. Up there, cruising at an altitude where the air gets thin and the silence is absolute, is a machine that doesn't care about your political leanings, your credit score, or how many followers you managed to hoard before the cellular towers turned into rusted monuments of a dead era. This machine is a thermal drone, and it doesn't see you as a human being with hopes, dreams, or a questionable collection of vintage stamps. To the drone, you are nothing more than a mathematical error. You are a statistical anomaly screaming in the language of infrared. Most people, the ones who grew up thinking that survival meant choosing the right filter for their glamping photos, believe that if they just throw a standard hardware store tarp over their heads, they've become one with the shadows. They think that because they can't see the drone can't see them. It's a touching sentiment, really, right up until the moment a precision-guided gift arrives from the stratosphere to correct their misunderstanding. Let's be brutally honest. If you think a piece of plastic is going to save you from a sensor tuned to detect a fraction of a degree in temperature variance, you aren't a survivor. You're just a warm meal waiting for an algorithmic delivery driver. The fundamental disconnect lies in how we perceive reality versus how the machine perceives it. We see shapes, colors, and textures. We see a forest, a pile of rocks, or a hole in the ground. The drone, however, sees contrast. It is a predator of differences. Picture the world through its lens. A monochromatic landscape of charcoal grays and deep blacks, a frozen world where everything has settled into a comfortable, icy equilibrium with the earth. And then, there's you. You are a radiant, man-shaped blob of white phosphorus, pulsing at a constant, stubborn 98.6 degrees against a backdrop of 50-degree soil and 40-degree midnight air. You aren't just visible, you are a beacon of biological arrogance. You are literally glowing with the heat of your own metabolism, announcing your presence to anything with a sensor and emission profile. The mistake isn't just a lack of camouflage, it's a lack of understanding physics. The drone's sensor doesn't actually see heat in the way we think of it. It measures the delta gap between the background noise of the planet and the loud, sweaty broadcast of your mammalian biology. When you huddle under that basic tarp, you aren't hiding. You're just heating up the plastic. Within minutes, your body heat transfers to the cover, turning your supposedly stealthy shelter into a larger, slightly dimmer, but still entirely obvious rectangle of warmth that stands out like a neon sign in a graveyard. To defeat this mechanical god, you have to stop thinking like a hider and start thinking like a physicist. The enemy is contrast, and contrast is fueled by the three fundamental laws of heat transfer. If you don't beat all three, you've already lost. The first, and perhaps the most treacherous, is radiation. This isn't the kind of radiation that turns you into a superhero or makes your hair fall out. This is infrared radiation. Every single second, your body is shedding energy in the form of invisible waves. It's like you're a radio station, but instead of playing top 40 hits, you're broadcasting your exact GPS coordinates to anyone with a thermal imager. The second law is conduction, which is the physical betrayal of touch. If you lean your warm back against the cold, damp wall of a trench, your heat doesn't just stay in your skin, it bleeds. It migrates into the wall, warming the earth around you and creating a thermal footprint that lingers long after you've moved. If your shelter's roof is touching your head, that heat moves straight through the material and lights up the surface like a stove burner. Finally, there's convection heat carried by the air. This is the only one the average person understands. They block the wind, they feel a bit warmer, and they assume they've achieved invisibility. In reality, they've only addressed the easiest problem while leaving the two more dangerous ones wide open. A true ghost shelter, the kind that lets you sleep while the drones circle like hungry vultures, must be an absolute prison for all three forms of energy. The construction of such a tomb for your thermal signature begins with the realization that you are the problem. You are a heat engine that won't shut off until you're dead, and since we're trying to avoid that particular outcome, we have to contain the engine. We start by digging. Not a massive, sprawling bunker that would make a suburban developer proud, but a low-profile dugout, just enough space to exist without becoming a claustrophobic mess. Once the hole is prepped, we install the first and most critical layer, the radiant barrier. For this, we use the humble Mylar emergency blanket, that crinkly silver sheet of plastic that usually lives at the bottom of overpriced go bags. But here is where most people fail. They use it as a blanket. In a ghost shelter, its placement is completely counterintuitive. You don't put it on the outside to reflect the world, you put it on the inside, facing you. You must face the shiny, reflective side inward, toward your own body. We aren't trying to hide from the drone yet, we are trying to manage the internal signature at ground zero. That Mylar surface acts as a near-perfect mirror for long-wave infrared radiation. It takes the heat waves jumping off your skin and bounces them right back at you. It's a feedback loop of warmth that keeps you from freezing while simultaneously preventing that thermal energy from ever beginning its journey to the outer layers of the shelter. You are effectively trapping your ghost inside a silver box, ensuring that the first line of defense is also the most absolute. It's the difference between letting your heat wander off into the woods and keeping it on a very short, very shiny leash. So, there you are, huddled in your shiny silver cocoon like a discount-baked potato, feeling quite pleased with yourself for trapping your radiant heat inside a Mylar box. In the old world, you probably would have posted a selfie of this moment with a caption about self-care and unplugging, but out here, the only thing unplugging is your connection to a long life expectancy if you stop now. You've managed to contain the radiation, but physics isn't a one-trick pony. By trapping all that heat, you've turned the air inside your little foil palace into a literal oven. This brings us to a phenomenon that has killed more amateurs than bad water: conduction. This is the physical betrayal of touch. If that warm Mylar layer touches the next part of your shelter, the heat doesn't just sit there, it migrates. It travels through the material like a virus through an open plan office. Your body heat will bleed right through the Mylar, into the framework, and eventually onto the outer surface, lighting you up like a flare for any eye in the sky. To prevent this, you have to embrace a concept that modern society has spent decades trying to eliminate: the dead air gap. In the pre-collapse era, everyone wanted to be connected. We wanted high-speed data, seamless transitions, and open concept living where every room bled into the next. In the survival era, connectivity is a death sentence. You need isolation. You need layer 2. This layer is remarkably simple, yet most people skip it because it feels too passive. Using nothing but small, notched sticks or debris, you must prop the next layer of your shelter at least 6 inches away from that internal Mylar barrier. This creates a pocket of trapped, unmoving air buffer zone. Air is an exceptionally poor conductor of heat when it isn't moving. By creating this 6-inch void, you are building a thermal no-man's land where your body heat goes to die. Without this gap, the physics of conduction will find the path of least resistance and turn your roof into a glowing beacon. It's the ultimate irony of the apocalypse. The most valuable thing you can own isn't a fancy tactical knife or a filtered water bottle. It's 6 inches of absolutely nothing. It is a vacuum of consequence. If you don't respect the gap, you're just heating up a very expensive signal fire for the machines. Once you've trapped the radiation and buffered the conduction with your dead air gap, you've solved the internal logistics of your thermal signature. You're no longer a glowing man-shaped blob, you're a lukewarm anomaly. But lukewarm isn't good enough. Better than nothing is a phrase used by people who end up as cautionary tales. To truly become a ghost, you have to neutralize the external heat signature that gives you away to the world above. You need to achieve what the engineers call thermal equilibrium, but we're just going to call it becoming the dirt. This leads us to layer 3, the cold roof. This isn't just a layer of camouflage, it's a thermal sponge. We're talking about a heavy, dense layer of material like sod, packed earth, or thick frozen turf. You want at least 12 inches of it. This isn't for insulation. Your dead air gap already handled the heavy lifting there. The purpose of this massive layer of earth is to absorb any stray warmth that manages to sneak through the first two layers and dissipate it before it ever reaches the surface. Think of this dirt as a high-tech dampening system for your biology. Any tiny amount of heat bleed that escapes your mylar and crosses the air gap gets soaked up by the dense, cold mass of the earth above you. By the time that energy tries to reach the outer surface, it's been spread so thin and absorbed so thoroughly that the temperature of your roof becomes indistinguishable from the temperature of the forest floor 20 feet away. To a thermal imager, you aren't a person in a hole. You are a seamless patch in the landscape. You have effectively deleted yourself from the infrared spectrum. In a world where every smart device was designed to track your location for the sake of selling you targeted ads for artisanal beard oil, there is a profound, dark poeticism in using 12 inches of mud to finally achieve true privacy. You are finally off the grid, but not in the way the trendy influencers imagined it. You aren't living in a tiny home with a composting toilet. You're living in a grave that refuses to be occupied. However, even if you are thermally invisible, you can still be found by a different kind of mechanical intelligence. We live in a world built on geometry. Humans are obsessed with straight lines, perfect right angles, and symmetrical shapes. We build squares and rectangles because they're easy to measure and even easier to stack. Nature, on the other hand, is a chaotic mess of fractals, jagged edges, and irregular curves. If you build a perfectly square shelter and cover it with a foot of dirt, you've created a perfectly square mound of dirt. A drone's optical sensors and its pattern recognition AI aren't just looking for heat, they are tuned to spot unnatural shapes. A perfect square in the middle of a random forest is an artificial scar on the landscape that screams human presence louder than a megaphone. This is where you have to practice shape discipline. You have to unlearn every architectural instinct you've ever had. This isn't just about throwing some leaves on top and calling it a day. That's what a weekend camper does before they get raided for their canned beans. True shape discipline is the deliberate art of chaos. You need to obscure every straight edge and every sharp corner with fallen branches, jagged rocks, and uneven mounds of debris. You want to create random, intersecting lines that cross the true boundaries of your shelter. You want to disrupt the flat plane of the roof with clumps of sod and mounds of leaf litter until the structure looks like nothing more than a natural pile of deadfall or a geological fluke. You are trying to destroy the hard shadows that geometric shapes cast, shadows that the AI is programmed to identify as man-made. You are trying to make your existence look like an accident of nature. In the old world, we spent our lives trying to stand out, to be unique, to carve our names into the digital landscape. Now, your survival depends on your ability to be absolutely, purposefully unremarkable. You have to blend into the random texture of the world until you are nothing more than a smudge on a lens. You've built the perfect tomb. You've mastered the art of the Mylar mirror. You've respected the 6 inches of sacred nothingness that is the air gap, and you've piled enough dirt on your head to make a graveyard shift worker feel right at home. You are, for all intents and purposes, a geological feature. But here is the uncomfortable truth that most survivalists forget while they're busy LARPing in the woods. You are still alive. And being alive is a loud, messy, thermally expensive habit. You are a living heat engine, a biological reactor that constantly converts canned beans and questionable water into 98.6 degrees of pure tactical liability. Even inside your high-tech mud hut, your own biology is trying to betray you. Every time you take a breath, you aren't just exchanging oxygen for carbon dioxide, you are launching a thermal signal flare. To a high-altitude drone, your warm breath isn't just air, it's a bright, pulsating plume of white steam that rises through your vents like a soul trying to escape a crime scene. In the old world, you probably spent a fortune on flavored vapes or organic breath mints to make your exhalations more pleasant. Now, the only thing you should care about is making your breath invisible. If you don't manage your thermal plume, you're just a guy in a very well-insulated oven who happens to be screaming his location through a chimney. Thermal discipline is the final, most grueling stage of becoming a ghost. It's the realization that even your most basic human functions are now signature events that need to be mitigated. The simplest way to handle the breathing problem is a trick as old as the mountains: the wool filter. A thick, dense wool scarf or a heavy piece of felt over your nose and mouth isn't just for comfort, it's a primitive heat exchanger. As you exhale, the wool captures the moisture and the warmth, spreading the thermal energy across a massive surface area of tiny fibers. By the time the air actually makes it through the fabric and into the open, it has been stripped of its concentrated heat. It's no longer a sharp, bright column of energy. It's a diffused, cooling mist that blends into the background before it can ever reach the drone's sensor. It's physics at its most basic and its most effective. Of course, sitting in a hole while sucking on a damp wool sock for 12 hours isn't exactly the heroic survivalist image most people have in mind. But out here, dignity is the first thing you trade for another day of breathing. If you're planning on staying in one spot for more than a few hours, maybe waiting out a patrol, or just hiding from the general absurdity of the post-collapse landscape, you need a more permanent solution. The mouse hole vent. Instead of letting your breath rise naturally through the top of your shelter, you engineer a concealed exhaust system. This is a small, horizontal tunnel, usually no wider than a soda can, that leads from your living space and snakes out into the base of a dense thicket, a pile of loose leaves, or a thorny briar patch. Your breath doesn't vent upward in a concentrated column where the AI can spot the movement. Instead, it travels through the tunnel and diffuses slowly through the millions of air pockets within the brush at ground level. The thermal signature is broken up, scattered, and cooled by the time it reaches the open air. It dissipates harmlessly among the roots and the dirt, miles below the notice of a machine that is programmed to look for the bright and the obvious. You are effectively turning the entire forest floor into your own personal cooling rack. But let's be real. Sometimes being invisible isn't enough. Sometimes you're dealing with an AI that is just a little too smart, or a drone operator who is bored and looking for something to justify their fuel consumption. In these moments, you need to stop playing defense and start playing with the machine's mind. This is called active deception, and it's where we exploit the fact that technology, for all its intelligence, is fundamentally stupid. It operates on logic, and logic can be tricked. You see, a drone's AI is a hunter of anomalies. It wants to find things that look like people or equipment. So, if you give it something that looks more like a person than you do, it will prioritize that target every single time. It's the digital equivalent of throwing a steak at a guard dog. The most effective tool in your deception kit is the decoy heat source. You don't need a high-tech robotic mannequin, you just need a small candle or a chemical hand warmer and an overturned tin can. Position these fake humans about 50 to 100 yards away from your actual location. A small candle under a tin can create a localized hotspot that, to a thermal sensor, looks suspiciously like a person huddled under a blanket or a piece of warm electronics. If you set up 2 or 3 of these decoys in a perimeter around your true shelter, you create a target-rich environment of false positives. When the automated drone system scans the area, it sees 3 clear heat sources and 1 very cold, very irregular patch of dirt. The AI, optimized for efficiency, will divert its attention to investigate the obvious targets first. While the machine is busy zooming in on an empty soup can, you are 500 feet away, sleeping soundly in the dark. You are exploiting the machine's own programming, turning its intelligence into a liability. It's a beautiful bit of irony. In a world ruled by silicon and sensors, a 2-cent candle can be your most effective bodyguard. Let's recap the laws of the ghost world before the sky decides to take another look at you. First, you trap the radiant heat inside with the Mylar barrier shiny side in, no exceptions. Second, you respect the dead air gap, because conduction is a snitch that will tell the world exactly where you are. Third, You build a cold, irregular roof out of at least a foot of dirt and debris to achieve thermal equilibrium and break the geometric patterns that machines love to hunt. And finally, you manage your own biological exhaust through filtration and diffusion, while leaving a few warm gifts around the woods to keep the AI occupied. Mastering these layers of physics isn't just a hobby, it's the only way to stop being a target and start being a part of the landscape. In the old world, people used to say you couldn't hide from the future. Well, the future is up there right now, humming at 10,000 feet and looking for a reason to delete you. If you've followed these steps, it won't find one. You'll just be another pile of dirt in a world full of them. And in the end, isn't that the ultimate goal? To be so irrelevant, so invisible, and so completely merged with the earth that the machines just give up and move on to the next casualty who thought a plastic tarp was enough?